Talking about time in English, it seems like it should be pretty simple.
Right.
Yesterday, today, tomorrow. Basic stuff.
Uh-huh.
But then you actually listen to native speakers.
Yeah.
And they use all these other phrases, things that just sound, I don't know, more natural.
Yeah, like there's this hidden layer or something.
Exactly. That
Mhm.
feeling. What if you're missing out on that layer when you talk about when things happened?
Well, that's exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive.
Yeah, welcome back.
We've got this great guide in front of us called Natural English Time Expressions, and it's all about that hidden layer.
Okay.
It's not really about the complex grammar rules, but more the actual words, the vocabulary, the patterns people use constantly.
The real world stuff.
Exactly. We're talking about routines, memories, plans, all that time-related chat.
So our mission today is basically to comb through this guide, pull out the absolute must-know bits for you. Give you a kind of shortcut, maybe, to sounding way more fluid, more natural when you're explaining when something happened or how long it went on for or how often you do it.
Because time just comes up constantly, doesn't it? Every conversation.
It really does. Daily routines, telling stories.
Making plans, remembering things, you can't avoid it. And getting these specific expressions right, that's a huge part of sounding, authentic.
Totally. And the cool thing this guy points out is, like you said, it's not about killer verb tenses.
Yeah, right.
It's more about picking up the vocabulary. These specific phrases native speakers just reach for without thinking.
Yeah, automatically. And often they use these phrases instead of something simpler that might seem correct, but just sounds a bit off.
A bit textbooky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this deep dive should give you a good handle on those natural patterns.
Okay, let's do it. First big area, talking about the past. So going beyond just last week or a month ago, how do we make that sound really natural?
Well, the guide highlights some brilliant ones that add a lot of flavor. One that jumps out, often with a touch of nostalgia, is back in the day.
Ooh, I like that one. It feels kind of warm, doesn't it? Like you're sharing a memory.
It really does. It sets a certain mood. The example they use is perfect. Back in the day, we used to play outside until sunset.
Right.
You hear that and it paints a picture, maybe a simpler time,
Yeah.
It's richer than just saying, when I was younger.
Yeah, that nuance is key.
Yeah.
What's another good one for the past? Something maybe more recent.
Okay, for something that happened, say, a few days ago, but you don't need pinpoint accuracy on the date, we often use the other day.
Right, like the other day I saw Sarah.
Precisely. The guide's example is, the other day I ran into an old friend from college. It suggests it was recent-ish, maybe a few days back, but the exact timing isn't the point.
And this is where the guide makes a really useful distinction. It shows, I saw her the other day, totally natural.
Yep.
But I saw her some days ago.
Yeah, it just grates a bit, doesn't it? It sounds unnatural. The other day is the fixed phrase you want.
Good to know. Okay, what about something even less specific? Further back than the other day, maybe.
For that, you've got a while ago.
So vague past. No real time frame attached.
Exactly. Just some time before now. The guide gives a relatable example. A while ago, I started learning Spanish, but I gave up.
Huh. I think many of us can relate to that one.
Totally. It happened in the past, could be months, could be a year, just a while ago.
Any other common past ones mentioned?
Well, you have the standards like years ago or a long time ago, which are pretty straightforward.
Sure.
And for stories, of course, there's the classic once upon a time. And if you're specifically talking about childhood, back when I was a kid is very common. Similar feel to back in the day, but tied to that specific period.
So just to circle back on why this matters, why use back in the day or the other day? Why not just stick to last Tuesday or 5 days ago?
It's about texture, really, and sounding natural. These phrases add color, they add nuance, they make your speech flow better and sound much more engaging.
Right.
Saying the other day sounds effortless, like part of the normal conversational toolkit. Some days ago sounds like you're translating in your head.
Or reading from a script.
Exactly. So using these phrases signals you're comfortable, you're integrated into how English is actually spoken. They're like little contextual shortcuts.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
That makes sense. So, moving on from the past, let's talk about right now, the present. How do native speakers naturally discuss what's happening currently or their general routines?
Yeah, describing current situations or habits definitely has its own set of go-to expressions. The guide points out several really common ones.
Okay, lay some on us. What are those key present phrases?
Probably one of the most frequent is these days. It just means currently in this general period, often used to contrast with the past.
Okay.
The example they give is good. These days, I'm working from home a lot, implying maybe you didn't used to.
And again, the guide nails a common mistake here. It says, these days I'm really busy. Sounds perfect.
Totally natural.
But if you say, these times I am very busy.
Oof. Yeah, no, that just doesn't work.
Why is that, do you think? It means the same thing technically.
It's just the established pattern. These days is the chunk, the set phrase people use. Nowadays is another one, very similar.
Right, nowadays.
Yeah, refers to modern times, often comparing now to then. Nowadays, everyone's on their phones, that kind of thing.
Okay. What about something happening literally right now, as we're talking?
For that immediate simultaneous action, you've got as we speak.
Okay.
The example is really clear. As we speak, he's on a plane to Italy. It pins the action directly to this exact moment of conversation.
Very specific. And then there are the more sort of general now phrases.
Exactly. At the moment is super common. Means right now or currently, often for a temporary situation. Like the guide's example. At the moment, I'm trying to stay off social media. Suggests it's a current effort, maybe not permanent. And yeah, of course, right now and currently are also perfectly natural ways to talk about the immediate present. The guide lists those too.
Using these just helps you sound, well, present, plugged into what's happening.
Absolutely. It makes your descriptions of your life or current events feel relevant and naturally expressed, avoids sounding stiff.
Okay, past, present, check. Let's peer into the crystal ball. The future. How do we talk about what's coming up in that natural native speaker way?
Well, the guide covers a nice range here, too. From things happening very soon to stuff way off in the distance, and even things you just hope will happen eventually.
Let's start close. Near future. What's beyond tomorrow or next week?
You've got soon, which is always useful, and then some nice informal ones like in a bit or in a minute.
Even if it's not literally a minute.
Yeah, exactly. It just means very soon in a casual way. The example they use is perfect. I'll call you back in a bit.
Yeah, in a bit sounds much more chill than I shall return your call shortly.
Definitely more relaxed. Then for something slightly further out but still relatively soon, there's later on or after a while.
Okay.
Example, we'll find out the results later on.
Yeah.
So not immediately, but sometime later today or in the near future.
Right. What about those bigger picture things? Goals, long-term plans, stuff you expect will happen sometime, but you don't know exactly when.
That's prime territory for eventually or at some point.
Okay.
The guide uses this example. Eventually, I want to move to another country. It signals a future aspiration. The timing isn't fixed, but the intention is there.
And here's another one of those mini quiz moments from the guide I liked. He wants to go there eventually.
Yeah.
Natural.
Yeah.
He wants to go there someday in the future. It sounds kind of clunky, redundant almost.
It really does. Eventually packs all that meaning into one neat word. It's the go-to.
Good tip. Any others for the more distant future?
Yeah, for things further out or talking at long-term consequences, you might hear down the line or in the long run.
Like, it might seem tough now, but it'll be worth it down the line.
Precisely. Or investing early pays off in the long run, discussing those longer-term outcomes.
So using these different future phrases gives your plans and predictions that natural feel, whether you're talking next hour or next decade.
Yeah, they add that important nuance about how near or far, how certain that future thing feels.
Okay, we've hit the big three. Past, present, future. The when. But sometimes the key thing isn't when, but how long something lasted. Duration.
Exactly. Duration is all about the length of time something takes or continues. And the guide gives us some really common ways to express this, often with a bit of feeling thrown in.
Feeling, like complaining about waiting too long.
You got it. That's exactly where phrases like for ages or for a while shine, especially for ages. It often implies exaggeration.
Like it felt like forever, even if it wasn't literally ages.
Precisely. The classic example, I've been waiting for ages. You can just hear the impatience, right?
Definitely felt that waiting for a bus sometimes.
Yeah, we all have. The guide also points out using all for continuous stretches. All day, all night, the whole week.
Simple but effective.
Yeah. The example, they talked all night, really suggests a long, continuous conversation covering that entire period.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about other ways to say something took a really long time, maybe too long?
Yes. The guide includes the informal, and again, often exaggerated, since forever, usually for relationships. We've known each other since forever.
Right.
And very related is it took forever, meaning something just dragged on much longer than you wanted or expected. Getting that permit took forever.
Yeah.
And nonstop is another good one for continuous action. He worked nonstop to finish the project.
These duration words really pack a punch, don't they? They add emphasis, sometimes emotion, exaggeration, makes it more vivid than just saying, for 3 hours.
Absolutely. They convey the experience of that time passing, not just the clock time.
Okay, great. So points in time, duration, what's left, how often something happens, frequency.
Frequency, yeah. How regularly or irregularly something occurs. The guide gives us a good spread of common expressions for this too.
Let's start with things that happen, sometimes. Not all the time, not never, but occasionally.
Okay, the common ones here are once in a while and from time to time. They pretty much mean the same thing. Occasionally.
And once in a while, that's another one where the guide contrasts it with something simpler but less natural.
Right. It points out that I see him once in a while sounds much more natural than saying I don't see him often.
Even though they convey similar ideas. Why do you think that is? Is once in a while just more idiomatic?
I think that's exactly it. It functions as a complete unit, a standard chunk of language for occasionally. While not often is perfectly understandable, once in a while just flows better in everyday chat for that meaning. It's the preferred pattern.
Interesting how language develops those preferences.
It really is. Another phrase for a regular occurrence is every now and then. Similar meaning. Like the example. I go hiking every now and then. It implies it happens, but not on any fixed schedule. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay. What about the other end of the scale? Things happening constantly.
For high frequency, all the time is your go-to phrase. Example, she checks her phone all the time. Suggests very frequent, maybe even constant, action.
Sadly relatable for many of us. Any other useful frequency ones?
The guide mentions on and off, which is great for describing something intermittent, things that start, stop, then start again over a period.
Like studying a language.
Exactly. I've been learning guitar on and off for years, and for things that almost never happen, hardly ever, or rarely are the standards, I hardly ever eat fast food.
Using these gives you so much more range than just sticking to always, sometimes, never.
Definitely. It provides a richer, more nuanced way to talk about your habits and how frequently things occur naturally.
All right, now for the really fun part. I think idioms. This is where English gets colorful. The guide includes some great time-related idioms.
Oh, yes, idioms. The secret handshake of fluent speakers. Using these correctly really makes you sound natural.
So what are some key time idioms the guide flags?
Well, several are about deadlines and timing. There's beat the clock, which means finishing something just before the time runs out.
Okay.
And maybe even more common is in the nick of time. Same idea as succeeding at the very last possible moment. The guide says, we finished the project in the nick of time. You can almost feel the relief.
Totally. What else?
How about that feeling when you're having fun or super busy and suddenly hours have passed?
Time flies.
Exactly. Time flies when you're having fun. A universal truth.
Certainly feels like it doing this deep dive.
Right. Then there's the opposite of being on time. Behind schedule. Pretty self-explanatory. You're late. Things are taking longer than planned.
Happens to the best of us. What's that phrase for when you decide, okay, enough work for today?
That would be call it a day. The example is perfect. Let's call it a day. We've done enough. It's the signal to stop working.
A very welcome phrase sometimes. One more. What about trying to catch up after missing out on something?
That's make up for lost time. It means doing something intensely or enthusiastically because you couldn't do it before.
Example.
The guide suggests, now that I'm free, I want to make up for lost time. Maybe after a busy period, you want to socialize more or travel.
Using idioms like these, it really does shift how you sound, doesn't it? More personality, more fluency.
Absolutely. They're powerful tools for making your English more expressive and, frankly, more like a native speaker's.
And what's cool is the guide doesn't just give you a list. It shows them in action, in mini dialogues.
Yeah, those examples are really helpful. Like in one, someone asks, what's your morning routine like these days? Using these days totally naturally.
Right.
And someone else replies later about something they haven't done since back in college, effortlessly slotting in that past reference.
It shows how they just weave into normal conversation.
Exactly. And another dialogue uses future phrases like, in a few weeks, and soon, when planning. When's your trip? In a few weeks. Probably mid-July. Oh, that's coming up soon.
Seeing them used like that makes them feel less like homework vocabulary and more like actual tools for talking.
Precisely. Context is everything.
Okay, before we wrap this up, let's maybe do a quick highlight reel. Based on the guide's own summary, what are some of the absolute power phrases we've covered that listeners should really try to grab onto?
Good idea. These are definitely high-impact ones, worth practicing.
Okay.
Back in the day, for that nostalgic past. The other day, for the recent unspecified past.
Right.
These days, to talk about your current situation.
Yep.
Eventually, I'd like to, for future hopes or plans.
Crucial one.
For ages, when something feels like it took forever. Every now and then, for things you do irregularly.
Good alternative to sometimes.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Everyone needs that one.
Still good.
And maybe in no time, meaning very quickly or soon. Another useful one.
That's a solid list to start with. And the core advice from the source is really just practice, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Say them out loud. Use them in sentences about your life. That repetition, that active usage is what makes them stick and become automatic.
Turning the knowledge into an actual habit.
That's the goal.
So looking at the big picture then, the main takeaway from this guide seems to be that really mastering these natural ways of talking about time, past, present, future, duration, frequency,
Yeah.
it makes a massive difference in how fluent and native-like your English sounds.
Huge difference. And crucially, as the source keeps saying, it's less about drilling complex grammar and more about absorbing and using these common vocabulary patterns and idioms. It's pattern recognition and practice.
It makes you think, though, about all these varied phrases back in the day. Eventually, for ages, does using these specific expressions, these often multi-word units, actually change more than just what you say about time? Does it subtly change how you feel about that past memory or that future plan or how long you waited? Does the language itself shape our perception of time and beyond time? What other everyday concepts might have these rich native layers of expression just waiting to be uncovered in English?
That's a really fascinating thought to leave things on. Does the language color the experience?
Definitely something to ponder. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into natural English time expressions.
My pleasure.
We really hope you picked up some valuable, practical phrases today that you can start using right away to make your English sound even more natural. Thanks for listening.
Okay, let's dive in. Have you ever been there? You're in a conversation, maybe in English, talking about something, a movie, work stuff, weekend plans, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got this thought. You really want to share it. Maybe you totally agree, or maybe you see it differently. And you just kind of freeze for a second.
Oh, absolutely. That moment where you know what you want to say, but the how.
Mm-hmm.
How do you phrase it? How do you get your point across smoothly?
Yeah. Or how do you agree? So it sounds like you're genuinely with them. And the big one for a lot of people, disagreeing without making things weird or, confrontational.
That little pause, that hesitation, it's super common. You've got the idea, the words for the topic, but the actual language of like expressing your position.
The conversational glue.
Exactly. The stuff that makes it flow, the politeness, the signaling, it's subtle. And that's precisely what we're digging into today.
Okay, so what's our source for this?
We've got a really practical article here. It's called Expressing Opinions. Agreeing and disagreeing smoothly, basically designed to tackle these exact issues.
Right, I saw that. It says it's for intermediate to advanced learners, but honestly, I think the stuff in here is useful for pretty much anyone speaking English in conversations.
I agree. It really breaks down how to sound more natural, more confident, especially when you're sharing your thoughts or dealing with different viewpoints.
So it covers the whole process, from starting your thought to responding.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Giving your opinion, agreeing, disagreeing, even when you're not totally sure about something. It's quite comprehensive.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is basically to pull out the best bits from this source, right? The key phrases, the strategies you can actually use straight away.
Exactly. We want to give you those nuggets of knowledge so you feel more comfortable, more fluent when you're sharing your perspective in English. It's like a shortcut.
Because it really matters, doesn't it? Getting this right helps you join in properly, build connections, and just avoid those awkward misunderstandings.
Definitely. It's about making your communication clearer and, frankly, more effective. It's a key part of real fluency.
Totally. It's moving from just knowing words to, using them skillfully in actual talk. Okay, so let's start where the source starts. Just signaling you're about to give your opinion. You can't always just blurt it out.
No, You usually need a little phrase first, kind of heads up.
Oh.
The article lists quite a few good ones that signal, okay, here comes my perspective.
All right, give us some of the main ones from the source, the go-tos.
Sure. Well, you've got the classics, very standard, in my opinion. And I believe that. Can't really go wrong with those.
Simple. Direct. My opinion, incoming.
Pretty much. But then there are variations, like, from my point of view, which kind of suggests it's one angle, or as far as I'm concerned.
That one feels a bit stronger, maybe, as far as I'm concerned.
It can, yeah. It often implies this is your firm take, regardless of what others might think. Then there are slightly more informal ones the source mentions.
Like
if you ask me, which is very conversational, often for advice or a personal take. And to be honest.
To be honest. That definitely signals you're about to say what you really think. Maybe something a bit direct.
Often, yes. It prepares the listener for candor. And the source also lists personally, I think, which, again, emphasizes it's your individual view.
Right, so like the examples in the source. In my opinion, that movie was overrated. Straightforward.
Or, personally, I think exercise is the best way to stay healthy.
Yeah.
That personally adds that subjective weight.
So these aren't just like throat-clearing phrases. They actually do something. They frame what's coming next.
Precisely. They manage expectations, add a bit of politeness, clarify it's your view. Okay, so moving on. Someone else states their opinion. Now you need to respond. Let's talk agreement first. Seems easy, but...
Yeah, you could just nod, say, uh-huh. But that doesn't really build connection, does it? What better options does the source give?
Much better options. Good agreement phrases show you're really listening and value their input. The source has some great ones.
Like the simple, I totally agree.
Yep. Strong, clear. Or, you're absolutely right. That really validates their point.
That's a good point, isn't it?
Nice. Because it highlights the value of what they specifically said.
I couldn't agree more. It feels really emphatic, like you're 100% aligned.
It is. Leaves no room for doubt.
Yeah.
Then you have the short, sharp ones like, exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. When you think they've nailed it. Or, I feel the same way, which connects more personally.
The source mentioned an informal one, too, didn't it? You took the words right out of my mouth. Love that one.
Yeah, it's great for when someone says exactly what you were thinking. Very natural. And the examples help, like, you're absolutely right about the importance of sleep.
Affirms it strongly.
Or, I couldn't agree more with your idea. Shows total buy-in.
Using these makes it feel more like you're building something together in the conversation, not just taking turns.
Right. You're reinforcing things, building rapport.
Okay.
Now for the trickier part for many. Disagreeing politely. This is where the source really emphasizes technique.
Yeah, just blurting out, I disagree, or you're wrong can be, well, pretty abrasive in English. Kills the vibe.
Totally.
Yeah.
It can shut down the conversation. The key thing the source stresses is softening. You need to cushion the disagreement, show you've heard them first.
Okay, so how does that work? What are the magic softening phrases?
Well, the classic pattern is acknowledge, then state your difference. So phrases like, I see your point, but, or I understand what you mean, however, are golden.
That little but or however is doing some heavy lifting there.
It is, but it comes after you've acknowledged them. That's the crucial bit. You're saying, okay, I get your logic, then you pivot. Another good one is, that's true, but on the other hand, explicitly brings in another side.
Feels much less like a direct attack.
Way less. The source also gives phrases that express disagreement more gently, like, I'm not sure I agree with that. Framing it as uncertainty is polite, or I see it a little differently. Very soft.
I see it a little differently. Yeah, that sounds quite diplomatic.
It is. It implies a difference in perspective, not necessarily that one is right and one is wrong. Then there are more formal options. The source notes, respectfully, I think, adds that layer of politeness, good for sensitive topics, or talking to your boss, maybe.
Right. And what about, I beg to differ? Sounds a bit old-fashioned.
It is a bit formal, maybe slightly old-fashioned, yeah. The source notes its formality. You probably wouldn't use it chatting about movies with mates.
Gotcha. Context matters. The examples really help show this, like, I see your point, but I think there's another side to consider.
Exactly. Validate, then pivot. Or, respectfully, I think that might not be the whole story. Formal softener, then the differing view.
It's amazing how just a few words change the whole interaction. Turns a potential argument into more of a discussion.
That's the goal. Productive communication, especially when views differ. It lets you discuss things properly without causing offense. Okay, what if you're just not sure? No strong opinion or genuinely uncertain. The source covers that too.
Yes, expressing uncertainty, also important.
Very. It shows you're being careful. not overstating things. Makes you sound more thoughtful. The source gives phrases like, I'm not entirely sure, but...
Instantly signals this might not be 100% correct.
Right. Or, it seems to me that, based on your perception, not necessarily fact, I could be wrong, but is very direct about your uncertainty.
Shows a bit of humility, which is always good.
Definitely. And things like, from what I understand, or, if I'm not mistaken, they reference your knowledge, but admit it might be incomplete.
Super useful when things are a bit fuzzy. Like the source examples. I'm not entirely sure, but I think the meeting is tomorrow. Or, from what I understand, they're planning to expand next year.
Exactly. You share the info, but flag its potential uncertainty, its precise communication.
Okay, so we've got stating opinions, agreeing, disagreeing, being uncertain. What's next? Backing it up, giving reasons.
Yes, because just stating an opinion or disagreement isn't always enough. You often need to explain why. The source gives us the connector words for this.
The basics, like because and since.
Yeah, because directly gives the reason. I think X because Y. Since is similar, often explaining the background reason. Since it's late, let's go. The source also has due to, which is a bit more formal, often linking a cause to a result, especially with nouns. Delays were due to traffic.
Okay, that's the why. What about providing evidence or examples?
Right, that's where, for example, and for instance, come in. Super common, very versatile. They signal a specific case that illustrates your point.
And for explaining results or consequences.
The source mentions, this is why. Linking a cause to an effect. I didn't sleep. This is why I'm grumpy. And the reason is that, which is just a very explicit way to introduce the explanation.
Can we hear some of those source examples again?
Sure. For reasons. I believe exercise is important because it improves mental health. Because links the belief to the reason. Or she should stay home since she's sick. Since provides the rationale.
And for example?
Regular exercise has benefits. For example, it reduces stress. For example, it introduces that specific illustration.
These connectors really are the building blocks for a clear argument, aren't they? They help people follow your thinking.
Absolutely. They make your point stronger, more logical, easier to grasp.
Now, the source also had some sample dialogues, which I think are great for seeing the stuff in action.
Yeah, reading a list is one thing, but seeing how the phrases fit into a natural back and forth conversation, that really makes it click. There's one about a movie.
Right, where someone gives an opinion like, in my opinion, the plot was confusing.
And the other person agrees, I totally agree, I was lost. Uses those phrases naturally.
And the work idea dialogue showed the polite disagreement really well. Someone suggests something.
And the response might be something like, I see your point about launching quickly, but I'm not sure the team is ready. See, acknowledge, then the but.
Or, I understand the enthusiasm, however, maybe we need more data first.
Exactly. Those softeners, I see your point, but... I understand, however, they frame the disagreement constructively. It keeps the door open for discussion.
It really is a skill. And the source finishes up by reminding us to practice, right? And it has that handy summary, the power phrases.
Yeah, that section is basically the highlight reel. The most useful, versatile phrases distilled from the whole article, like a quick reference guide.
Okay, let's just quickly run through those key power phrases again as a final takeaway from the source.
All right. For starting your opinion, in my opinion, and maybe the more direct, to be honest.
For agreeing strongly, I totally agree.
For disagreeing politely, remember the structure. I see your point, but. And the more formal touch with respectfully, I think.
Backing it up with evidence, for example.
And expressing that careful uncertainty. I'm not entirely sure, but...
That's a really solid set of tools right there. Covers a lot of ground.
It really does. Getting comfortable with even just those can make a huge difference in how natural and confident you sound when sharing your views in English.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, we've pulled out the key advice from this source on expressing opinions smoothly. We looked at kicking off your thoughts, agreeing enthusiastically, and crucially, disagreeing without causing drama using those softeners.
Plus, expressing uncertainty and using connectors to build your points, all based on the strategies outlined in the source material.
And the big message really is that using these phrases isn't just about vocabulary, it's about strategy. It helps you sound more natural, more sure of yourself, and just clearer, moving from just okay English to really engaging English. Okay, so here's something to think about. We talked about those phrases for polite disagreement. I see your point, but fine. Respectfully, I think.
Yeah.
What if you consciously used one of those next time you really have to disagree with someone? How might that single choice, that little bit of softening, actually change the outcome of that conversation? Think about it when disagreeing becomes less about just stating opposition and more about carefully navigating the social space. What happens then? These phrases aren't just nice, they're subtle but powerful tools for ensuring your different view gets heard and considered, fostering understanding instead of just friction. How might that change things for you?